Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today in Bern, Switzerland, visiting the Swiss Shooting Museum, taking a look at a couple of very cool, very rare Swiss trials rifles that they have on display here. These are Stamm-Saurer rifles. They are a straight pull bolt-action rifle design developed by a guy named Hans Stamm. Now, Hans Stamm got his start actually in designing tooling and as a draftsman for tools for the embroidery trade. A company he worked at ended up getting into the small arms business, and in the late 1890s through the very early 1900s, he actually did some development of a semi-automatic rifle. Didn't go anywhere. I have a separate video on that, which you should definitely check out if you're interested. But it left Stamm looking for a job. So in 1907, he's applying for work with all of the major gun manufacturers in Switzerland, like WF Bern, like SIG, and like a bunch of industrial companies. And he ends up getting hired by the Saurer company. Now, Saurer is an industrial firm, and at this point, 1907, they're actually making automobiles. They're making trucks in Switzerland, and they have decided that they want to open an arms division. They know that the Swiss Army is in the process of adopting a brand new cartridge, and there's a lot of potential for a new rifle and carbine contract for the Swiss military, and Saurer wants to get in on that. So they set up their arms branch. They have 8 employees in it. 2 of them are gunsmiths. Hans Stamm, is in charge of the operation, and he puts together a very nice straight pull bolt action rifle. It is first submitted to the Swiss government in 1908, and it goes through a number of trials until about 1913. So let's take a closer look. We have both a short carbine version and a long rifle version. These would have been competing for what eventually were adopted as the K11 and the G11 rifle and carbine in Swiss service. All right, let's start by taking a look at the long rifle here. The 2 guns are identical in action, just one has a bit longer of a barrel. The magazine is a Mauser-style blind magazine. Unfortunately, the floor plates for both of these guns are missing. I suspect at some point, probably about 75 years ago, some curator decided to store them separately, and they have been misplaced since. It is a straight pull bolt action, so there's no space to lift the bolt. We have a ring safety, very much like the Schmidt-Rubin system. So in this position, it's safed. You can pull it back, rotate it down. That's the fire position, and like with the Schmidt-Rubin, if you fire and you get a misfire for some reason, a light strike on the primer, you can leave the bolt locked, recock it, and fire again. We have a very nice Swiss target shooting sort of front sight there. It's a crisp square front post. The front ramp here is checkered so that you don't get any glare on it. And then the rear sight is actually reminiscent of the German Gewehr 98 sight. Because the slider is actually mounted on the base here, and it lifts up the rear sight leaf. It is graduated from a minimum of 300 out to a maximum of 2,000 meters. And one of the little details here that I kind of like is the pointer on the side actually points to the very middle of the range that you're shooting at. So if you're set to 1,000 meters, it's going to point right in the middle of the 10 marking. Same thing with 6. If we flip this over to the other side, because it's on, normally being on the line means you're on the next one up, but I think it's actually a little more evident to have the pointer literally in the middle of whatever marking you're shooting at. You do also have the marks down here on the sight base. We have Swiss proof marks, so these guns were proofed, and this one is serial number 37. We also have one of the Stamm-Saurer bayonets here. In fact, this is number 37. It's the matching bayonet for this rifle. This didn't use an existing Swiss ordnance pattern bayonet. It's actually kind of a bayonet design copied or similar to the Gras, where there's a heavy T-rib at the top of the bayonet to stiffen it. There is a cleaning rod at the front of the nose cap. This is actually screwed into the receiver, so you have to unscrew it a bit and then screw it a lot. And then you can pull the cleaning rod out, but the bayonet will install over the cleaning rod back onto those lugs and around the muzzle, like so. The bolt is nice and smooth to operate, and removing it just requires pulling this lever out and then the bolt slides out. And we can disassemble the bolt by pulling the safety back, rotating it into this middle position, not the safe, not the fire position. Then we can unscrew the whole end cap. This is a very Mauser-ish style system that allows you to get your striker and a striker spring. And then what you can do is hold this down and slide this off and remove the spring, but that's going to be a real mess to reassemble if we do it. So I'm going to relieve the spring tension a bit and just leave it like this. Then I can just pull the bolt out. The bolt has one long continuous helical groove in it. That's what cams it open and shut as you pull the bolt open. There's a similar long guide rib inside the bolt body. And presto, that's all there is to it, the basic field strip of the Stamm-Saurer straight pull bolt. So the Carbine version here is essentially the same. It actually has the same sight graduations on it, just the handguard is a couple inches shorter, and of course the barrel is a couple inches shorter, but the same sling configuration, the same exact muzzle cap, just a little bit shorter overall. Actually, the one sling difference is here at the back, where the long rifle has the sling, the rear sling, just behind the pistol grip. The Carbine has it farther back on the stock. Ultimately, Saurer will submit these rifles to the Swiss government through about 1913. They actually try to keep pushing these guns for Swiss adoption even after the G11 and K11 are formally adopted, which happens in January of 1913. There really don't seem to be any technical faults with the Saurer rifles. It's very high quality. It's chambered for the standard cartridge. The sights are great. The bolt's nice and smooth. But ultimately, the Swiss decide to go with the rifle, the Schmidt-Rubin pattern rifle developed and manufactured at Waffenfabrik Bern. And the reasons are probably largely political. There is definitely an advantage in that the Schmidt-Rubin was the system that the Swiss military was already using, so there's a lot of institutional knowledge that can carry over if they just adopt a new variation on that same system. Apparently, Adolf Saurer, who owned this company, was not particularly interested in making any changes to his design. He thought it was like perfect as is, and of course militaries always want to make some tweaks and changes to things. He also wasn't interested in licensing its production to, say, the government factory in Bern. He wanted to do all the production himself, which certainly would have raised the cost for the government. You put all of these factors together, and it's really no surprise that the government arsenal wins the contract for the new government rifles. That doesn't always happen, but it does usually happen. So in 1913, when they finally accept that this is not being adopted by the Swiss military, the company does make some efforts to sell it internationally. The guns are all chambered for, well, at that point, by 1913, the guns are all chambered for the Swiss GP11 cartridge, and they do send some out for foreign trials, for foreign presentation. They don't get so far as making versions in other cartridges, which kind of would be the next logical step, and that's largely because World War I breaks out. And with global war happening, nobody's really looking at adopting a new bolt-action rifle. They're interested in trying to manufacture as many as possible of what they're already using. So ultimately, this whole system comes to an end there. It's around for about 5 years. Beautiful rifle. There's actually, interestingly, they have here at the museum a photograph of the Swiss team at the Camp Perry match in the US in 1913. And you can see in the picture, one of the guys on the team actually has one of these Stamm-Saurer straight pull rifles. Kind of cool. Anyway, a big thanks to the Swiss Shooting Museum for giving me the opportunity to take these two off the wall and show them to you guys. They are, in fact, generally, well, by the time you see this, they will be on display at the museum. So if you're interested in the history of Swiss marksmanship, Swiss target shooting, and some Swiss military rifle development, make sure to hit up the Swiss Shooting Museum in Bern and stop in for a couple hours and check it out. Thanks for watching.